The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everybody. I hope everyone is having a great Tuesday so far. On this Cinco de Mayo, actually, I forgot about that until just now. Um, so thank you for joining us, everybody. Today we will have Morrison Living. We would like to say thank you to our valued business partner, Morrison Living, for being part of our Safe and Calm webinar series. For more than 50 years, Morrison Living has provided dining, environmental, and wellness solutions, and they understand the unique needs of the senior living industry. They will work with you to develop unique solutions for your community and put your success and the happiness of residents first. The experiences they create allow those you care for to feel proud of where they live, fulfilled, and excited about what each day will bring. Today, our presenter will be Erin Van Valkenburg, and she is the Director of Nursing and Wellness for the Midwest region with Morrison Living. Erin is passionate about creating and designing living environments and dining experiences and communities that support adult living. By sharing her 30 years of experience and knowledge, she is able to mentor and encourage inspiring nutrition professionals to enhance the quality of life and well-being for older adults. Today, she will be providing adequate nutrition and hydration during social distancing and isolation during COVID-19. If anybody has any questions, we will address those at the end, so feel free, as always, to type those in the questions chat, and we will go over those at the end. Other than that, I don't think I have anything else to go over, so I will now turn it over to Erin. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure being here. First of all, I'd like to just share that I actually am not a nursing director. I am not a nurse. I'm a dietitian. So I'm actually the Director of Nutrition and Wellness for Morrison Living in the Midwest. I chose not to be a nurse because I couldn't handle bodily fluids and blood especially. So I would much rather spend my energy and time with food and nutrition. So it is a pleasure to be here, and thank you, Leading Age Michigan, for having me. The first thing I need to share with you is this disclaimer. The content in this webinar is intended to provide information only and best practices related to nutrition and hydration needs of residents with COVID-19. This information is only as current as May the 5th. As we all know, things are changing daily, and we continue to learn and discover about COVID-19 and the impact it has, especially on the nutritional status on residents and patients. The information has been derived from several reputable sources, and a resource list can be found at the end of this presentation. So my objectives today are to discuss the risk factors and symptom management of COVID-19 as it relates to nutrition and hydration. We also are going to describe the unintended consequences of social distancing and isolation. And I want to explore current nutrition and hydration recommendations for adults with and recovering from COVID-19. So this slide really shares nothing new. We all know and we've all heard of this, but I think it's a good starting point for us. We all know that older adults and people who have severe underlying medical conditions are really at higher risk for developing more serious complications from COVID-19. If we look at the signs and symptoms of COVID-19, this list isn't any different than we all know about as well. More persons with COVID-19 experience the following symptoms: fever, cough, fatigue, anorexia, shortness of breath, sputum production or mucus, and muscle aches. Now you ask, why is this important? Because as a dietitian, each one of these symptoms affects the nutrition and hydration intake of people, right? Fever creates more of a need for hydration. Cough constantly inhibits people from being able to eat. Fatigue tells people that they have trouble with eating, where they might be trouble with the actual intake of getting the food into their mouth. Anorexia happens when they don't feel like eating. Shortness of breath is a problem because they don't feel like eating and they can't breathe as they eat. Sputum and muscle aches as well is an issue. So let's look at the nutrition and hydration challenges related to COVID-19. About 8 weeks ago, CMS said to us, we need to change the dining process and we need to keep our residents safe. So they basically said that we should be isolating our folks in rooms. This change in dining process and timing and routines really threw a wrench in how we provided dining services and meals to our residents. It created social isolation. The lack of activities and social engagement, maybe a family member who was always available to come and eat with the resident or help assist the resident mealtime was no longer able to be there. We also saw staff shortages and less assistance because as residents got sick, we also had staff that got sick. Another problem that became a challenge for us was PPE that was worn by staff. For those that had any kind of cognitive problems, that PPE might have become a fearfulness now, and people didn't want to eat as people were wearing masks and gowns and face masks, and it could be that they didn't understand what was going on. So PPE has really become a challenge for us, and it can be very upsetting for our residents. We also had problems as we moved residents around in the buildings, as we tried to cohort people who were having COVID versus people who didn't. So they might not have had their familiar staff or favorite staff member available to assist them. So because of all of these challenges, we saw a problem in nutrition and hydration, which also increased the problem with weight loss and malnutrition. So let's look at what the actual recommendations are for nutrition and hydration for people who have COVID-19. Now this is in the non-ICU setting. So the recommendations from ASPEN, which is the American Society of Parenteral and Enteral Nutrition Guidelines, suggest that for fluids, we want to look at least 3 quarts or 3 liters of fluid per day. We want to have an average calorie intake of between 2,000 and 2,500 calories per day, and a protein intake of 75 to 100 grams per day. Now, these are just general guidelines for the average adult. Obviously, individual needs need to be looked at and will be decided by a dietitian. But if we look at these general guidelines, we can see that hydration, to have this happen where we get 3 quarts a day, we should be providing fluids every hour. And the idea is to be able to consume 2 to 4 ounces of fluids about every 15 to 30 minutes. We don't overload people with fluids and don't expect them to drink 8 to 12 ounces of fluids at a time, especially if they're positive for COVID. We want to offer clear liquid beverages such as water, juice, and broth. We want to make sure that we use disposable cups and straws if possible. And if they're wearing a mask, which has now become the routine, not only for our residents, but for our staff members, we may need to offer less fluid, may need to offer less fluid, not every 15 to 30 minutes, but maybe do it every hour and increase the fluids. Because remember, you're going to have to remove that mask and then reapply that mask every time you give sips and drinks of fluid. Another really great idea to offer fluid is to make sure that you provide it at each care encounter. So on the COVID positive units that I have seen, especially the isolation units, when somebody goes into a room, the thought process behind it is to try and offer fluids at that time. And most units are rounding about every 30 to 45 minutes to make sure that the residents are doing okay. Now here's some best practices that you might want to consider. This is Happy Hairy Hippo, and he is a hydration guy. We also know that other ideas for increasing fluids might be a popsicle that they could suck on, or you could do a hydration cart where you roll it down the hallway and provide hydration at a different time, maybe 10 and 2, or any time during the day. Getting other staff members involved, I think, is really helpful and important, as well as provides that social engagement that the residents might be looking for. So here's just some examples of that. If we look at calories, we want to provide an additional 250 to 500 calories per day over the normal needs. And to accomplish this, we can consume small bites and meals, maybe 6 times a day or every 2 or 3 hours. We know from experience that people who are COVID positive have a lack of taste and a lack of smell, and they have a lot of anorexia. And so putting a big meal in front of them might be a complete turnoff. So if you're thinking that we are only going to get nutrition in at 8, 12, and 5 during meal times, that's probably going to be very difficult, and they might turn away. So the idea is to provide 6 small meals a day or every 2 or 3 hours. Try and get them to eat, even if it doesn't taste good or if they're not hungry. We have also found that people consume cold things better than they consume hot things, most likely because there is less smell related to it, and it seems to go down better. Remember that calories are important to protect against the breakdown and to build that muscle and to provide that energy they need to fight off this virus. And due to the increased stress of COVID-19, there is definitely a need for more calories. So best practices increasing calories, we want to try to serve nutrient-dense foods. So think about foods that are higher in calories. You can fortify regular foods if you need to. I think of that as oatmeal. We can definitely add butter and cream and sugar and things to the oatmeal to increase the calorie content than just having regular oatmeal. There's also a way to fortify juice as well, to add some protein or some extra additional calories than just drinking straight juice. Lots of great recipes out there on how to fortify regular foods. I know of people who fortify mashed potatoes by adding cream or sour cream or butter, again, to increase the calorie content without actually increasing the food intake. You can double or triple the portion sizes of the added fats, such as butter or cream. And then you can consider using a commercial nutritional supplement to give medications instead of water. And a lot of times our nursing staff will do this, where they will actually pass with what they call a med pass or some kind of fortified product instead of just water. And then provide small frequent meals and snacks. For protein, we want to consume at least 75 to 100 grams of protein per day. And basically that translates to between 10 to 14 ounces of protein, or 3 or 4 ounces per meal. And if you think about this, about 3 ounces of protein should fit in the palm of your hand. So if you're thinking eggs, it should fit in the palm of your hand, a chicken breast, a meat patty. It's a good way to visualize about how much 10 to 14 ounces of protein is. Rich sources of protein include peanut or nut butters, milk, eggs, yogurt, cheese, meat, fish, poultry. Don't forget about protein shakes or tofu and beans, all good sources of protein to be able to increase our needs. So one of the questions that I get as a dietitian, especially in the last month or so, are vitamins and mineral supplements beneficial in treating or preventing COVID-19? And there is a lot of research going on right now. And based on the available data today, it appears that eating a healthy, balanced diet is the best defense for COVID-19. Though there appears to be some evidence that increasing vitamin C, vitamin D, and zinc may play a beneficial role if there is a known deficiency. However, no vitamins or minerals have been validated on human trials related to COVID-19, and there is no recommendation at this time. And I think this is an important fact. because sometimes when you give additional vitamin and mineral supplementation, you actually can cause more harm than you can good. So you need to be careful about recommending any kind of vitamins and minerals. That doesn't mean that you can't take a multivitamin that's just a general amount. What we're suggesting here is being careful of high doses of vitamin C or high doses of zinc. So one of the things that we talked about was malnutrition and weight loss challenges due to COVID-19. And these are really important, and we are seeing this because there's a physical decline due to the illness. We're also seeing malnutrition and weight loss because of the use of disposables. The foods now that are being delivered to our rooms are coming on disposables. It is extremely difficult to keep the food hot on a disposable and palatable. And so what we're seeing is that some folks are choosing just not to eat because it doesn't look good or taste good. And because they don't feel good already, why bother? We have limited assistance from staff. Some communities are having difficulty trying to figure out how to provide enough staff, especially for those residents who need assistance with meals. There's definitely changes in taste and smell. They might be emotionally upset or fearful, either from the PPE, or they might think that their family member who was unable to visit them any longer no longer loves them or cares for them. And a lot of places now are unable to actually obtain weights, either because the resident is too ill to actually be weighed or because of an infection control process. So these are all issues that are really a challenge for us right now, and we are seeing weight loss within our communities. So one of the things that we suggest is to use a nutrition and hydration rounds observation checklist. A lot of dietitians right now are working remotely, or because this is a COVID unit where it's in isolation, they are not allowed to go into that unit or onto that floor. So one of the things that we have created is a checklist that nursing or a CNA or another essential worker that's in that isolation unit can use to provide that information to the dietitian so an intervention can be put into play. Another idea that we have used that has really, really worked is to come up with a COVID-19 nutrition protocol, or what we call a standing order. And so the idea behind a standing order is if residents are admitted with a COVID diagnosis, they are actually given a standing order before an assessment or before a dietitian is actually available to be able to see what's going on. So the idea is that nutrition and hydration interventions are implemented as soon as possible, and that is why we've created this standing order. Here is an example of a nutrition and hydration protocol. The below guidelines will be implemented immediately following a positive or suspected case. And you can see that the goal is to provide 16 ounces of fluid at each meal, provide an additional 10 grams at each meal, and to provide an additional 250 calories at each meal. How this might look is to use a community-specific protocol or template. And the idea is these foods would then be added to the person's tray ticket or to the tray that is delivered to them until the dietitian comes in and does an assessment and then customizes and individualizes these needs. So at breakfast, we would replace the juice on the menu with a fortified juice. We would replace the hot cereal with a fortified cereal, and we would add 8 ounces of additional water. At lunch, we would take off the dessert and add a fortified pudding possibly, maybe include a health shake instead of the milk, or you could use whole milk instead of skim milk for an additional 80 calories. And then we would add some broth. At dinner, we could use a magic cup or maybe another fortified juice. It's really up to you and how creative you can be with the protocol. These are just examples. There is no recommendation that these products are the end all. You can use anything you want, but the idea would be to increase the fluids, add an additional 10 grams of protein, and an additional 250 calories per meal. I think this is important, and I think that it is necessary that we be proactive instead of reactive. Once somebody has lost weight, that is really where you have more trouble, where you'd be better off giving them the food and the calories ahead of time, knowing that there is already some issues that are going to happen from a nutritional and hydration standpoint just by being positive for COVID. Another example that I'd like to use and show is the snack cart checklist that I have come up with. I think that a snack cart can be beneficial in many ways, and it's an example that we can include other staff into helping provide nutrition and hydration. So a snack cart can be used by anybody. It doesn't have to be a dining staff person to do it. It could be activities or social service. It could be the MDS coordinator that is going to pitch in and help and decide what to do. If you set up the snack cart correctly, it can go into the positive COVID units that are in isolation, as well as the non-positive COVID units. And giving direction is super important, but it's also important that you print out a diet report, because the last thing that we want to do is have residents who have any kind of nutritional concern or needing a modified texture diet with a swallowing issue gets the wrong texture or the wrong food item. So make sure that you print out a diet report so that they know what to use. From there, you can give them a little sample here, and you can see we've created a little spreadsheet about the different diets that are available and if the foods on the snack cart fit that diet. So that it gives them a roadmap to use as they're using the snack cart, and it goes down the hallways. This is a really great idea. It provides socialization to the residents, as well as more nutrition and hydration, and also meets that 6 small meals as well as additional fluids. In this picture, I wanted to share with you as well some other ideas. A lot of times, CMS has now suggested that we use disposables in our COVID isolated wings, but we know that that is not always possible to keep the foods palatable and warm. Here's some examples and ideas of how people have come up with creative ways to present food using disposables. So on the left-hand picture here, you'll see that they decided to do burgers and fries, but they made it almost like a fast food method. And somebody just basically went out and bought some little cars to put the hamburger and the fries in to give it just yet another little creative appeal. In the center here, you'll see that we have actually opened up like a little store where residents can come and get some things if need be, if they're independent or assisted, or we can deliver some extra and additional things that they can order. We're trying to make sure that the foods are high nutritional value and that they're not always just the ice cream or cakes and candies or the different snack things that come in packages, but we want to make sure that we can give them the best nutrition possible. We have other communities that decided that they wanted to become a pizza parlor, and they actually went out and bought pizza boxes, and they made pizzas all day, and people could order the pizzas that they wanted, and they were delivered in the box. So again, it's being creative with the ideas that they have available and making sure that we can get the food and the hydration into these folks and keep them socially engaged. Now, I know on everybody's mind right now, as we're moving into our 8th week of this isolation and eating in our rooms, we're really talking about what are we going to do when we reopen our dining rooms. And this is a big conversation right now for a lot of us. And I think it's important that we have a plan in place and that we need to think through the steps that are necessary to make this happen. Just like they shut the dining rooms down for a lot of our folks, I do believe that we need to reopen our dining rooms up, but we need to do it in a systematic way, and we need to do it slow and effectively. So some of the things that I think that we need to consider is that if we are using disposables, when can we go back to use regular china dishes? We really don't want to have to use disposables if we reopen our dining rooms up. But that means that we need to look at the policy on how we're going to clean and clear the dishes from the tables, right? Are we going to wear gloves? Are we going to put them in a dish pan? How are we going to get them into the dish room? We might consider expanding our dining times to accommodate smaller crowds. So if you always serve meals at 8, 12, and 5, it might be now that we're going to serve breakfast from 7 to 9 and lunch from 11 to 1 and dinner from 4 to 6, so that we're expanding the dining times so that we can actually see people into the dining room, but we can keep that social distancing that will probably be necessary for the next 6 to 8 months. With that said, we might be able to just have 2 residents per table instead of 4. That might be the social distancing that we're going to need to be looking at. We'll need to configure our spaces so that the tables are spread appropriately throughout the room, and we may need to remove a few tables or move tables into another living space. Again, something to think about as we move towards reopening. I think it's important that we remove all unnecessary items from the tables, especially condiments, centerpieces, pencils, paper menus, all of those things that our residents touch every day. We've got to think about how we're going to provide those services, but in a different way so that they're just not sitting at the table and that they can be touched. I would no longer preset food items. I know that's a standard for a lot of folks. They might set water out on the table, or they might put their first course on the table as people come into the dining room. But I think that at this point in time, we're going to have to think differently. This might be where that snack cart now becomes an appetizer cart. And it could be that the appetizers are put on the cart and the cart is rolled around the table and the appetizers then put in front of the resident. I also think it's important that we look at rolled silverware instead of having silverware exposed onto the table as a preset item. Another suggestion might be to provide moist hot towels before each meal for residents to clean their hands, or maybe a wipe. Maybe it's really just one of those sandy wipes, or we go and we use hand sanitizer. I do think that we're going to have to start thinking from an infection control process and how we're going to do things differently in our dining rooms. And then you might want to consider table covers, and then they would just need to be changed after each meal, whether that's linen or placemats or paper placemats. What are you going to do to change the infection control and to the cleaning of the table before and after each meal? There's a lot of ideas right now floating around, and we are still waiting from CMS guidelines on what that actually is going to look like. There is some infection control now guidelines for public spaces and for restaurants. We do think that there will have some similarities, but I am still waiting for the guidelines. Until then, I do think that it's important that we think about how our dining rooms are going to be open so that we can be prepared. Overall, I think nutrition and hydration is just so important in making sure that we recover for COVID-19. With that, I'd like to thank you for having me. If there's any questions, I would be happy to take any at this time.
Right now I actually only have one question, and it says, will these slides be available for us to share with others? Yes, me and Erin discussed this right before we started the webinar, and she will be sending me over the handouts, and if you would like them, you can go ahead and email myself, Blake, B-L-A-K-E, at leadingagemi.org, or you can go ahead and email info, I-N-F-O, at leadingagemi.org. That way multiple of us see it, and we can make sure to get the handouts over to you. Other than that, I am not seeing any other questions. So we would like to thank Aaron, all of our members who attended today. I believe there was around 40 participants. So thank you all that took your time out of your busy days to join us for today's webinar. We appreciate everything you do each and every day to support your staff and provide quality care to your residents. We are grateful for your continued support, and we are here for you when you need our assistance and resources. We do have another COVID-19 webinar with Deanna Mitchell coming up tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. If you're not registered for that, again, you can go ahead and email info and we will get you the link for that. Other than that, I think that will be it. Thank you again to Aaron and Morrison. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.